Are you stuck in survival mode, just trying to make it through each day? Or are you ready to grow, to build something that actually lasts? I've lived both, and the difference comes down to one thing: the ground you're standing on. Today, I'm going to break down three things that set Svalbard and Lofoten apart: survival, growth, and the threshold between them. Stick around, we're going to get into it. I'm Ben, polar chef, 20 years up north from the total dark of Svalbard to the peaks of Lofoten. If you're curious about the contrast, scan the QR code. It leads to polarchefben.com. Everything's there. Now let's break it down. People ask me all the time, which is better, Svalbard or Lofoten? And I always say, in Svalbard, the trees are so small that you can just step over them. Dwarf birch, polar willow, they never grow past a few centimeters. They spend their entire lives trying to survive the wind and the permafrost. But in Lofoten, you can walk through a birch forest, real trees, real roots, a place where things actually grow. That's not just a difference in the landscape, it's a difference in what's possible. Let's start with survival. Survival. The dwarf birch doesn't just grow tall in height, it's a liability in the high Arctic wind. So a lot of people think we don't have trees on Svalbard, but actually we have trees. There's like berries that grow there. There's moss, even have mushrooms. And it's not really possible to have mushrooms unless you have some kind of tree or forest system to support it. It's just that it's so small, and the Arctic winds there are so, they just punish everything. So doesn't make sense to grow very tall there. And then you have everything stays very small, very tight, very compact. But of course, if the situation allowed it, they would grow taller, but it doesn't make sense for them to grow tall because they get everything they need. The season is so intense, and it's like you have total darkness for a few months, you have 24 hours light for a few months. So it doesn't really make sense for things to grow too tall there on Svalbard. It survives by staying small, staying low, and maximizing local utility. So this is the key thing about Svalbard, is that it's more about survival. It's more about doing what's necessary. That's what survival looks like: a tight, unshakable foundation under extreme constraints. And this is what Svalbard taught me. Svalbard taught me that survival isn't a bad thing. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you need to survive. And some people enjoy this survival, just, the adrenaline, the situation awareness. So there's many reasons why survival might be the key. And this is what Svalbard has to offer. Many people go there, they stay for 1 year. Many people don't stay for a long time on Svalbard. I actually stayed for many years on Svalbard, but I don't really recommend it. And especially now, it used to be much better before, because now it's like they've changed all the rules. Now it's much more complicated to do anything there, especially if you're a foreigner. If you're Norwegian and if you have connections to Norway, it's a lot easier. But before, everybody used to kind of have equal rights, and now it's kind of like favors more to Norwegians. So foreigners, they kind of get lost in the shuffle. But when I was there, it was an amazing time. Everybody was like, being on Svalbard is like being on a ship, and everybody's just working together. Everybody's, because there's polar bears, and sometimes they come through the center of town. I remember on one New Year's, a polar bear went through the center of town, and you just need to be able to go into any place. So people leave their doors open. This was before, and then you could just run in if there was a polar bear. And survival is definitely the key on Svalbard. Chad, I would like to take the temperature of your life right now. Give me a thumbs up if you feel you're thriving, or a thumbs down if you feel like you're just surviving. Drop it in the chat and let me know. The next thing I would like to speak about is survival. Survival is one thing, but growth is something else entirely. So let's move on to growth. And you can see growth. The top one is how it looks on Svalbard. and the bottom one is how it looks in Lofoten. In Lofoten, the trees grow tall, but they need much deeper roots to withstand the winds, the coastal storms. They require a different structure, interconnected, supported by a community of trees. And this is important because, when you have tall trees, then you have every tree in the forest has a purpose. So you have trees that stay low or shrubs that stay low. You have some trees that grow taller. So they're all working together to create the situation that benefits everybody. They require different structure, interconnected, supported by a community. And that's growth. When you build something that can stand on its own, but not alone. So even though you have this forest of trees, they're all working together. They're supporting each other, but they're not alone. They all need each other. They all work together. And Lofoten taught me how to grow. And since I've been in Lofoten since 2021, I was on Svalbard from 2009 until 2021, but I would take breaks, take holidays, go do different things. And of course, I'm from the States, from Ohio, so it's pretty strange to have been on Svalbard that long. But I really liked Norway. I really enjoyed Svalbard. It was like the place where I really felt home. And I had my family there. We had our children there. And it was just a perfect small community where everything is close. The school is close. The supermarket is close. You actually don't need a car on Svalbard because everything is like kind of right in the same area. But of course, it's nice to have a car there, but it's not necessary. And then in Lofoten, things are spread out a bit more. So you have Leknes, where I stay, and then you have Svolvær. So they're like the two biggest towns. I don't want to say cities, but the two biggest towns in Lofoten. And like on Svalbard, it's one city, Longyearbyen, so everything was in one place. You had the cinema, you had the training center, like the swimming pool, the training center. They had a sports center there. You can play basketball, different things like that. But here in Lofoten, it's like they spread things out more. So of course, each Svolvær and Leknes, they have smaller cities around them that support them. And like, for example, the hospital is in Gravdal, and Leknes is in the middle of Lofoten. So the hospital is there, but then in Svolvær, they have like a community, like a medical center. And then if it's something they can't fix, then they send you to the hospital here in Gravdal. And then if there's something that the hospital in Gravdal can't take care of, then they send you to Buda, of course. So they will fly you there so that you can do something more serious. And then, of course, if there's something that they can't take care of in Buda, then they send you to Tromsø or they send you to Trondheim. So it's like all supported. And like I really learned how to grow here. And I came here, I took over a restaurant. And actually, this is the restaurant that I took over when I first came, Heim Restaurant. It was, it's a really nice location. I highly recommend it. You come to Hemminggarden Lodge if you do come to Balstad. And I took over this restaurant for 2 years. I learned so much. I grew so much. And then from here, I took over my cafe, Jordbærpikene in Leknes. And I just feel like there was the two different shifts. So if you're deciding between going somewhere in Norway, of course, many people want to come to Norway now. And I highly recommend it if it's possible. But Norway's not for everybody. And Svalbard's not for everybody. And Lofoten's not for everybody. And Lofoten and Svalbard are both in the north of Norway. And not many people want to go to the north, but it's like such a special place. It's so different. I feel like the people are nicer. They all say hi. And I feel like it's easier to find opportunities here, just depending on what you do. Like if you work with tourism or restaurants or hotels, like anywhere in Norway, you can find work. But I feel like people come to the north in Norway because they can move up quicker, because we're always looking for people. Everybody wants to go to Oslo. Everybody wants to go to Bergen. Everybody wants to go to Trondheim. Everybody wants to go to Stavanger. But not many people want to go to Tromsø. Not many people want to go to Buda. And there's a real gold mine of opportunity there to grow. So many people will go there. They will get like a bigger position. It's easier to get a bigger position in the north. And then you can work a few years and then you can transfer down to the south if you're interested. But I would recommend going to the north of Norway if you're planning to come, because you could have a better chance of finding opportunities. And I would also like to take another question in the chat. Okay, chat, are you ready to grow? Give a thumbs up if you're ready to grow, or a thumbs down if you kind of feel stuck. Drop it in the chat, okay? And then, so the question isn't which place is better, it's what you need right now. the threshold. Some people are built for survival. They thrive on the edge, the challenge, and the constraints. But if you want to grow and to build something with roots, you need a different ground. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. They're just different. They're just totally different. Svalbard is a treaty land. So after the World War II, there was a treaty that was signed in Paris. The countries that signed this treaty gave sovereignty to Norway. So Svalbard is part of Norway, but it's outside of Norway at the same time. And when you go to Svalbard, like if you come to Norway, you're in the Schengen zone. So you get stamped in, and depending on where you're from, you may need a visa. Like from the States where I'm from, I have to have a visa to go through Norway. But then when you go to Svalbard, you get stamped out. So they stamp you out, and then you can basically stay there for as long as you want. But then there's also some other rules that say to be on Svalbard, you have to be able to take care of yourself, you have to have a job, or you have to have some money, because you can't go there. There's like no social security there. You can't go there and not have a job and get money from the government. It doesn't really work like that. So the only thing you can do on Svalbard is you have to be like, you can't go there to retire. You don't really find people who are retired and just live there. It's not very common at all, because when people retire and they can't work anymore, then you have to leave. And it's kind of like, it's brutal in a way, but it's beautiful also in a way, because it's like you have to be productive there. And like what's wrong with that? Like you go there, you contribute, and everybody's working together, and you work together, you hang out together. It's like being on a ship, but you're on land, and you work with the people, you hang out with the people. And it's really taught me survival and just dealing with polar bears. You know, when you go out too far outside of the town limits, you have to take a gun, and there you can get a gun just for polar bear protection. So it's not as serious, it's not as complicated as if you get a gun for hunting. Like when you get a gun for hunting, then you have to take a course, you have to have a license, you have to join usually this hunting organization. But when you get a gun for polar bear protection, it's different. It's only for polar bear protection. You can't use it for hunting. And then when you leave, you have to sell that gun to someone else, because you can't take it with you. When it's for polar bear protection, it has to stay there on Svalbard. And that's something that you take for granted, that every time you go out on Svalbard, you have to think about polar bears. It's like you can't take it for granted. And you really it's really about survival. Like when you have to deal with polar bears, and not that they're like come all the time, but they can be anywhere. And they're super quick. Like you can't outrun them. And like they go up in the mountains. So you're not safe if you go up in the mountains. I remember story some years ago about some people who were up in the mountains, and I think a bear came, and if I remember correctly, the girl tried to jump, and that I don't think she died from the bear, she died from jumping, if I remember correctly. And like you never know where they can be, so it's definitely about survival there. But like if you want to, if it taught me, Svalbard taught me how to survive, and Lofoten taught me how to grow. And I didn't leave Svalbard because I failed. I left because I outgrew it. And I think sometimes you have to understand when it's time to move on. And for me, it just came to the point where I felt like I've done everything I could do there. The situation just became so difficult with this COVID situation. Like I had a tourism business, and they locked down for tourists, and there was no income. It was just a liability. And like there was really no way out for me. So like that's why I decided to leave. And I looked at different opportunities. I was looking in Tromsø, I was looking at other places around Norway. But I kind of settled on Lofoten because I had a chance to run my own location. And that's what I always wanted, was to have my own cafe, restaurant. And I feel that that was the missing ingredient on Svalbard, was having my own location. And if I would have had my own cafe, like how I planned to, because I had planned to, but the challenge was to get a location there, because everything is owned by the government, everything is owned by companies. It's really tough to get locations there. But the difference is in Lofoten, there's a lot of opportunities available, because many Norwegians, they don't do this kind of work. They don't want to work restaurants. They don't want to work hotels. So it's mainly foreigners who work these kind of jobs. And you just, like every restaurant manager, owner that I know here is foreigner. There's not many Norwegians. Of course, there might be the main owner, might be a Norwegian, but the person, general manager, or the one running it is usually Polish or Swedish or from somewhere else. So there's plenty of opportunities if you're into that type of thing. And I highly recommend the north. It doesn't have to be Lofoten, but even Buda's nice, Tromso's nice. And there's a lot of other places that just need people, like even here, like even especially in the summer, like because we have a lot of competition also from the south. So more people go south to work, and it's hard to find people who do these kind of jobs anymore because people don't want to do it. It's hard work. I mean, it is hard work. But I have another question for you. So just give a thumbs up if you feel like you're surviving, or give a thumbs down if you want to grow and come to Norway and see what it's about. And before we wrap, I want to leave you with this, chat. Survival keeps you small. Growth requires roots, and roots need community. If you're trying to choose between the land of the dwarf birch, Svalbard, or the land of the forest, Lofoten, ask yourself this: are you here to survive, or are you here to grow? And this will help you decide if it's better to go to Svalbard or it's better to come to Lofoten. Thanks for being here. This is live number 7, the dwarf birch and the forest, Lofoten versus Svalbard. Next week, I'm going to talk about how not to do business in the Arctic in Norway and how I failed and rebuilt. If you ever failed at something and wondered how to come back from it, this is the one you don't want to miss. And this will be next Wednesday, 6 a.m. Just bring something warm, scan this code. It'll take you to polarchefben.com. Everything is there. I'm Ben, Polar Chef, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 6 a.m. Take care.